Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today's presentation is about recruitment and launching your survey as part of observational research. Well, this presentation is a part of a playlist on observational research. I invite you to watch previous videos in order to better understand today's presentation. And I need to remind you that we are talking about the fifth family of observational research, which is focused on non-manipulative research, or we call it observational or correlational research. So the objective of this presentation today is to help you to prepare for launching of your survey or your interview, and to help you with the recruitment and the training of your data gathering team. I'm going to talk about the launching and the recruitment preparation steps for your research, how to prepare your population sample and make sure you will have mapped your sample population and ready to make them engaged, how to prepare your field work, how to prepare your team to train them, and how to choose and prepare the equipment and carry on your pilot study before some takeaway messages. So actually one of the most important steps that we start with observational research is that if we are going to use questionnaire surveys, we need to understand that there are certain characteristics and specific information of the observational research using surveys. First of all, it requires a large number of observation. It is an extensive data gathering process with a lot of data collected through the questionnaire. We need to be broad rather than deep, and we need to use random sampling to avoid bias. Also, we need to look at relationships between the variables, and we seek to have remote closed data generation, and this will require a lot of quantitative data analysis. So this is important to take into account before starting launching your work. Also, another important point that you need to look at, that you need to, in order to be ready to launch your survey and start your recruitment process with the questionnaires, you need to understand that your sampling framework needs to be already fully defined and approved. What is a sampling framework? Sampling framework actually is designed to provide a template for the design and conduct your surveys. So you need to define your sources of information, the data you're going to collect, what will be your population, what is the population sample, what is the data and the sampling process, and the field work that you are going to conduct, including the timing and specific details. So let's start with the introduction of today's presentation. Well, when we talk about launching your survey, here we are talking specifically about launching and starting your recruitment process for questionnaires surveys. And questionnaire surveys can be distributed through two approaches, either hard copies, paper-based, or you can do it through virtual copies online. And you need to make this choice early on from the beginning when you start your design of your research. And like I told you earlier, that the sampling framework needs to be already defined, because in the sampling framework I will know already information about the target population and the data sources, the coverage and the exclusion criteria, what is the sample representativity that I'm going to launch my survey for, the sampling method that I'm using, the precision of my sample size needs to be already defined and validated, what is the population variance, what could be sample marginal error, which is simply calculating the outcome statistics and the standard errors, and how will be the sample distribution. So these are all important points that needs to be already in place before starting launching my survey and recruiting. Now, when we talk about defining the target population and the data sources, we are talking here about the population, which is a set of entities sharing the properties under consideration. When we talk about sample, we are talking about a subset collected or selected from this population for analysis, and we often use samples because it is impossible to analyze the complete population, and a well-designed research starts with defining the appropriate population to answer the research question. So it's important that we take this into account, that we're referring to sample and we do sampling processes, and because we cannot do a full measurement for the whole population. So this is the first step to take into account. Now, when we talk about a population sample, this is the second step, which is representative for the whole population. I need first of all to understand what is the context of this population sample. So first thing we look at before recruitment, we look at the population sample mapping and the geographical area they are located. So here we are studying the area, and we are starting to identify the locations where we will be working on, and we draw representative samples from the population to understand the geographic distribution of the population. And here we can apply geospatial sampling, for example, to make sure that we will have a representative population with appropriate distribution. Also, when we start to define our recruitment process, we need to set up our boundary condition, what will be the sample mapping and what will be the response rate that we are looking at, what will be the sample precision and the sample size, the exclusion and exclusion criteria, the observation checklist that we need to come up. So a good survey response rate could be varying between 5% to 30%. This is a basic information, and an excellent response is 50% or higher. So you need to expect always that you will have very low response rate. In reality, it is most of the time under 10%. But if you are well prepared, and if you did a very good recruitment and launched your survey in a very good condition, and you prepared for it very good, and you have maybe a very good budget for it, you can increase these low rates of 5% up to 30%. So the response rate refers to the number of people who completed your survey divided by the number of people who make up the total sample group. So it's very important to look at this aspect before starting. And you need also to address the ethical considerations when you are starting your population sample mapping. You need to have an ethical approval from an ethical committee and check the laws that you need to abide to. You need to respect confidentiality and the consent in regards to records, and make sure that you're going to secure the data that you're going to observe, and you're keeping it on a short period in a specific safe place. And for example, the GDPR regulation could be an example for that. You need to check the informed consent and make sure that your observed subjects, they will provide you with informed consent and allow them to approve or fully approve their work. And at any moment, they can even withdraw their consent from your survey. And you need to make sure that you have a feedback to the interviews. You always must give them a feedback once the survey is conducted. This could be in the form of a gift. If you don't have money or you don't have means for a gift, it could be simply sending them the outcome of your research. It can be sending them extra information, but you must always give to the interviewees or to your subject something back, even if it is in a form of the results of your work in itself. And for sure, you must provide feedback to the community. If you are working in a specific area, you need to contact the local authorities and the community and make sure that you documented the outcomes of your research and it's available, and that people can access this information, and you make it in a very easy way to find, so that you're making sure that you are interacting with them and you respected the privacy and ethical concern, and at the same time you are involving them and you are transparent with your research outcomes. Now, the third step that is very important as part of your steps or your recruitment launching process is to look at your field preparation. How I'm going to prepare for my field. So first of all, you need to have a headquarter. This headquarter requires that you have an office or a place that is considered as a headquarter. It has to be central. Somebody is there during the field research, so that if any problem, you can refer to this headquarter. The headquarter office will hold the computing equipment and serve as a storage place for the questionnaire. And it can have phone or radio facilities that are necessary for keeping contact with the field team, depending mobile or whatever communication means, in order to make sure that you have operationally somebody they can refer to in case of any problem. Also, you need to contact local authority, which is very important, because if you are conducting a survey, your teams are strangers that are regarded as suspicious. They could be seen as drug dealers, they could be seen as criminals, soliciting, whatever, and therefore you need to contact the local authorities in advance to let them know what they would be doing. And you need to secure with local authorities some permissions if you need to go to the local police stations and to inform them and to get their permissions if needed, depending on the context, on the country. You need to identify suitable local guides and, if necessary, translator. So these are all information, or these are all steps that need to take into account before launching your survey in general. And for sure, you need also to look at security measures. If you are working with data collection, you're working with drones, data collection sensors, you're going to collect data mechanically, you need to look at local guides that are often useful, indicating and avoiding security risk in this area. And this issue must be considered in advance. Also, the security risk on your team, if there is high violence, criminality, sometimes in surveys, it happens people can come out with a gun and start shooting on you once you are starting to approach their box office or their doors, or if they are discovering that you are doing a survey in their neighborhood. So these all important aspects of security needs to take into account, needs to be measured. You need to have a badge on you, you need to have somebody with you, and so on. Also, a very important step here as part of your preparation is to start to prepare your team and train them for conducting the investigation. So here we are looking at the size and the composition of your field team. The number of respondents required depends on the sample size, and you need, based on the sample size that you are seeking, to have certain teams that will start to investigate, and the number of days that will be spent surveying needs to be determined, the number of responses that you are requiring per day in average, and you need to estimate this number from the length of the working day divided by the amount of time it takes to complete the survey. So you need to determine that through the pre-test or through the pilot study that we're going to talk later on. And all the interviews must ask the question in the same way, and you must allow for travel time also as part of your preparation, so that when you time and create a time budget for the whole data collection process, the teams are well placed and every team has a feasible amount of responses that can be done per day, and then you have a full campaign that is measured on a long period or a short period depending on your sample size. Also, your field teams need to be trained and you need to be well selected. So a good survey organization requires a thorough field work because this is part of the vitality of your survey results. And a detailed description of the surveyors and the supervisors' tasks should be used to identify the potential candidates. So actually you start first with the characteristics of the survey and how the surveyor should be chosen, and based on that you can select your candidates. A field surveyors must be assigned to supervise 3 or 5 interviewers as they perform the survey, and ensure that the interviewers follow the instructions to bring consistency. Because if everything is centered with one person and you have several teams, more than 5 or 10 teams, then it will be very difficult to assure consistency. So now therefore you need to bring a supervisor per 3 to 4 or 5 maximum teams in order to make sure that you have a consistent approach. And while as part of your selecting of your training team, you need to provide sufficient training courses on survey guidelines for the interviewers, and you need to outline the whole survey procedure so that they understand where they are starting, where they are ending. And you need to control the data quality by checking for errors during the surveying and by checking that the forms are completed fully and correctly every time there is a survey. And you need to select the interviews and supervisors for their ability and their motivational performance to conduct these tasks, so that you are sure that you will have no drop rates and that you will have the mission accomplished at the end. Also, it's very important that surveyors must be polite, and they need to be establishing a good relationship with the respondents. Don't get people who cannot do this task. Everybody knows who is better on field, who is less better on field. So it's very important to avoid any type of conflicts on field. And it's very important to explain how to gain confidence to the respondents, and this could be during the training process, and how to avoid introducing or inducing answers. This is very important so that you avoid as much as possible the bias, and the importance of completing each assigned interview and following standard procedures. I remember one of my master students, he was conducting interviews in a remote area, and it was an area with low-income people, and simply he was taking with him bananas, and he was knocking door to door and starting to invite children to eat, or if they would like to get a banana as a gift. And this was an icebreaker. Maybe in this context it was working, in another context it cannot work. So the cultural sensitivity is so important, and you need to know what is possible, what is not possible. Talk to the local authorities, talk to local leaders in the area before, in order to make sure that you are not crossing any ethical or cultural or religious borders, in order also to increase the success rate of your gaining of your confidence of the respondent. Also, it's important to emphasize that the interviewers must ask the questions exactly as they are worded on the questionnaire for consistency, and make sure, like we said earlier, that the language is appropriately used, and conduct a field exercise as part of the pilot study. So as part of your pilot study, you can do field exercise and you can give instructions and test and check how your team is performing and conducting the interview. Now, one of the important roles of the interviewers who are conducting these questionnaire surveys is to have good communication skills. So interviewers should ensure they carry out certain tasks before asking respondents to answer the questions. First of all, they have to give the respondent their name and provide identification with a badge. They need to explain the survey is being conducted by whom. They need to describe the survey purpose. It's preferably that they provide a document or a paper and they put it in the post box, for example, or give it to the interviews before starting, so that they can allow for the address, giving information about the address and the source of this interview, in case the people want to complain, they want to establish contact with the police, they have a reference, they say, okay, those people are coming, are they real people or not? And then you have a traceable information about you. Explain that the respondent's household or business has been selected into the survey sample, and make sure that to give the respondent time to read the information about confidentiality issues and the voluntary or mandatory status of the survey, and any existing data sharing agreement with other organizations. So this is so important with the GDPR. If this information you are collecting going to be shared with another entity, with another organization, this must be stated during the survey or the questionnaire interview, and read the introduction message of the questionnaire of the respondent. So this is so important to start with communication. Now let's move to item number 5, which is the equipment that you need to have while conducting these, launching your survey. Actually, you need to prepare equipment and choose and prepare them. Equipment must be purchased well in advance of the survey, and here we're talking about field workers' badges. We are talking about field workers should also carry letters of introduction to the families, preferably on official letterhead, and these letters need to be dropped in the mailboxes before starting or given in hand, including all the details about the survey and the contact person and the responsibilities and the laws that are complying with. And you need to have an identification card with your photograph on it, so that you avoid any conflict of suspicious or misconduct. Also, you need to look at your tools that you are going to use. Are you going to use notebooks for the surveyors? Are you going to use papers, envelopes, and so on? All these information are important. If you are going to fill the questionnaire manually, are you going to have a hardboard card in order to use it and fill up the survey? And these are all steps needs to be taken into account. Then we talk about briefing to drivers. If your team is going to drive themselves or they have specific drivers often fail to understand random sampling and may even refuse to take secondary roads or passes to reach scattered area. So if you have drivers, they will never understand why you're going in this neighborhood, and then you're going back 2 blocks after, and then you're going forward. And sometimes you created your plan in a way to assure this randomness, but for this driver, they never understand what's going on. So it's very important to understand that you are explain to them, brief to them. You need to have the addresses well prepared in advance in GPS and so on. And all persons involved in the survey should be briefed about its main purpose and the main methodological guidance, including drivers. So don't subcontract your driver's task at the last minute and just get people and go through the survey in cities and towns without briefing the drivers, because they can block the whole process. Now, one of the important aspects of your data processing that you need also to work on setting up your computers and hiring data processing teams. So here you use the questionnaire of the pilot study for testing the data entry and the data programs, and this can be done in advance. And you need to check the programs of the production for the tables, for example, sort any problems if you are going to do categorization, and make any corrections if needed necessarily. Once the surveys are collected, also you need to save them in a good place. So you need to have the prompt return of the questionnaire to the headquarters, contributes to the quality control, and it allows early data entry, and for sure like that you can secure that the questionnaire is well saved and there is no risk of losing it or being a breach of information. Once this is done and you have all these preparations, now you can move to step number 6, which will be conducting a pilot study. The pilot study is very important. It will require a lot of resources. It will require a lot of preparation. And one of the basic steps that needs to be done with the pilot study is to work on carrying out your pilot work by working on the final rehearsal for your survey. So this is what we mean by pilot study. So a properly conducted pilot study will identify the major problems with the survey methodology, and it will help you to prevent them during the data collection. If you are using, for example, you are not defining the addresses properly, during the pilot study you discover that you need to have a GPS address, for example, to make sure that the addresses will not be getting lost. You will need to have different input. You need to have, for example, satellite maps. You need to have certain devices. The questionnaire was not going through enough. It takes a lot of time. It was complicated, and so on. It was raining. The climate conditions will be taken into account. So the pilot study will bring your team to the ground as soon as possible, and by that it will accelerate the process of learning and make your survey more mature, and will make your whole recruitment and launching step more mature. Well, this is the end of today's presentation. Some takeaway messages before I leave you. Well, make sure that all your logistical arrangements are well in place. Prepare the questionnaire and the training material. Select and train the field workers and invest in that. Make sure to choose and prepare the equipment that you are going to work on. Carry out the pilot study as soon as possible. Set up the computers and hire early on your data processing staff early on in order to get insights on your survey. Maybe you will need to change something before launching the survey. Introduce quality controls in place during the data collection process to guarantee that the research that your research will designated members are able to conduct this research, and for sure make arrangement for returning the questionnaire to the headquarters, and don't leave it a loose end asking people to come later on and then you start to lose your answers. Make sure that there's a protocol, there's a system of boxing, there's a system of filing, there's a system of letterheads and so on, to make sure that they are stored all in a central way. There is a labeling system, and then later on when you are need to refer them or classify them, the data is not lost. Well, this was the end of today's presentation. Today's presentation is about recruitment and launching questionnaire surveys. This was a part of a playlist on observational research. I invite you to watch next videos in order to benefit from this playlist. And again, I thank you very much for watching the video about recruitment and launching of questionnaire survey in observational research. Good luck with your surveys and good luck with your questionnaires.